sweet lilting laughters like some fairy song, and your eyes twinkle bright as can be. You should laugh all the while, and all other times while, and now smile a smile for me. When Irish eyes are smiling, sure it's like a morning spring. In the lilt of Irish laughter, you can hear the angels sing. When Irish hearts are happy, all the world seems bright and gay. And when Irish eyes are smiling, sure they'll steal your heart away.
We're gathered here tonight to celebrate a life well lived, the life of Dr. David Bryan Liddle. On behalf of the family, I wish to welcome all of you, those who have particularly traveled long distances, and all of us here share in the loss of a friend, a companion, but to all, a loved one. I am honored to have been asked to say a few words about my friend, David Liddle. Firstly, I wish to convey my sincere condolences to his beloved wife, Wendy, for whom he had the greatest of respect and admiration. Son Steve, Jacqueline, Dawn Amber, daughter Heather, Tom, also to Chris and Christina, Megan and Stephen, and of course, all of the 8 grandchildren. Indeed, we feel a tremendous loss. Over the past few days, I have had the opportunity to revisit my travels with David, both as a businessman and the closest of friends. Indeed, David was a man for all seasons. His natural talents were measureless. A proven academic, an educator, an entrepreneur, an outdoorsman, a builder, a no-nonsense approach to business. While short in stature, David stood as a giant for his many accomplishments in politics, in the academia, philanthropy, and the business world of insurance. For David, nothing was too small or too big. If the job had to be done, he would provide the leadership. Dave possessed the unique gift of humility, humble yet assertive, gentle, free from harshness, conciliatory, non-confrontational, and above all, a great gift, an excellent listener. His opinions of others mattered as he sought and fought for justice and fairness for all. The business community appreciated his open-minded advice, his nonpartisan approach to issues, and steadfast defense of his opinions and decisions when necessary. Dave was no bully, nor was he a pushover. He always knew the topography of the land, and he toiled it accordingly. Dave was unassuming, yet possessed the magic of having his presence known wherever he stood. Over the past 25 years, we developed a closer bond as our joy for life was shared and thoroughly enjoyed. Why, in many ways, he was a better man than I will ever be. He loved fishing. When we visited Timberwolf Fishing Camp, he caught all the pickerel, and I watched and ate on the sideline. He would join my fishing trips to northern Saskatchewan, and again, he would repeat his small miracles, even catching fish on a bare hook. He would fillet pike and pickerel with the authority of a skilled surgeon, always cautious of the Y bone in the pike. Our lunches were the best, as he had to be the master chef. He could handle an outboard motor with the greatest of ease, guiding the motor up the difficult rapids and shallow waters. He was masterful in his abilities, causing the boat to maneuver and move as a snake in difficult waters. On a trip to northern Ontario in a pontoon boat, the motor stopped, and here we were, a boat without a motor, without power, in the middle of nowhere. The lake grew bigger by the hour, which eventually looked, to me at least, like an ocean. Here appears mechanic Liddle, and within hours he had concocted connections which started the motor, and to our total amazement, we were back to safety. Small miracles may be, but awesome feats of experience and the understanding of the hazards of the wild and free. To celebrate that night, it was decided to share vodka martinis. Dave came up with a mixing jug that looked like a glass urinal. We objected to the use of this weird-looking vial, but Dave insisted. Out came the vermouth, the vodka, the olive, the somewhat dirty brine, and martinis were served. And to this day, they were the very best martinis I ever had. And as for the glass urinal, well, maybe it was an illusion. We traveled together, golfed together, ate at great restaurants, and Dave was always the bon vivant. He enjoyed a good glass of wine, good food, coupled always with resonating laughter. Such was his nature, a time to work, a time to reflect, and a time to play. A truly, truly blessed life. Our last golf game was last February in Arizona, where in the last game he beat me by 1 stroke. By now you know that neither of us are very good golfers. Nonetheless, to this day, he believed that I let him win. Well, Dave, wherever you are, today I confess. You won, and I paid the meal. I knew Dave as the founder and president of Northern Frontier. At a time when insurance was either unavailable or too costly to insure fishing lodges, Dave and friends created Northern Frontier, later to become the Optimum General Insurance Company, today a successful property and casualty company. As with respect to the Optimum Group, Dave and I had something in common. He sold Northern Frontier to Optimum, and I sold Gore General to Optimum. The difference is that Dave successfully engineered the future successes of Northern Frontier, and Optimum assimilated me. Kudos to you, Dave. Dave played an important role in the growth of Optimum, a feat few would deny. His travels took him across Canada, Vancouver, Montreal, Alberta, New Brunswick, Ontario, etc., to the Optimum Castle in Bordeaux, proudly carrying the mantle of the Optimum Group. Optimum Group was important to Dave and a big, big piece of his life, nearly 30 years. He sat on the board of my company, the UAB Group, a company where I acted as CEO and president for 17 years. Dave was strategically involved with me as we pursued multiple negotiations and acquisitions across Canada, diversifying the company as a unique provider of services to the insurance industry. His counsel was always supportive, yet filled with cautious, always guided for the need of a contingency plan. Upon my retirement from corporate life, I ventured out into the insurance brokerage field. Dave understood brokers, their aspirations, and need for the support and loyalty of their companies. Today, I thank him for his counsel and guidance as I witness the success of our brokerage. Passionate for good health and balanced diet. Later in life, Dave, undoubtedly under the supervision of his lovely wife Wendy, became health conscious, exercising every day and watching his diet. Wendy took wonderful care of him, mindful of diet, exercise, travel, and good living. They were indeed, in my opinion, a lovely couple. But in David's world, breakfast was a religious rite. Smoothies were in vogue, and everything had to be counted. 5 blueberries, not 6, not 7, undoubtedly freshly picked on Liddle Island, 7 almonds, not 6 or 8, a cup of yogurt, a half a banana, a cup of orange juice, concentrate, and all had to be measured as I listened to the lecture. What took 20 minutes to make took 5 minutes to drink. Then followed the cereals, and again we repeated the whole scenario. He had to count every morsel of that cereal. It is important to note that Dave never sought fame. Fame for Dave was a fool's game. Were he the poet, he would have wholeheartedly agreed with the words of Dobson. Fame is the food that dead men eat. I have no stomach for such meat. In little light and narrow room, they will eat it in their silent tomb, with no kind voices of comrade near. The feaster be of cheer. But a friendship is a noble thing. A friendship it is good to sing. For truly, when a man shall end, he shall live in the memory of his friends, and doth his better parts recall, and of his faults make over all. Had I had the privilege to speak to Dave prior to saying adieu or au revoir, he might have said the following: Serge, I hate to leave my loved ones, you know. Where I am going, there'll be no sorrow. There'll be no pain. There'll be no burdens to bear. There'll be no tears. And there'll be no parting over there. I shall travel from cloud to cloud, exploring every lake, pond, and oceans, looking for the very best fishing spots. I will visit new golf clubs, the finest, practice every day, just waiting to offer you a game or two. This time, I should beat you. I'll visit the finest wineries, allow my palate to taste the best of foods, and think of you every time I have a cool martini. I won't have to exercise no more, nor watch my weight, but I will miss you, Serge, and I know you will miss me. I have gone a little ahead of you. Forgive me for this. It wasn't planned this way. Remain positive, Serge. There's still a lot of living to do. I was hoping we could golf in Arizona this winter, but this will not be possible, and I do regret this very, very much. Well, Serge, take care, and I will see you in the by and by. In closing, may I say the following. I might add that David never sought fame or fortune, monuments or titles, believing in earnest that the true measure of success is the ability to touch and leave a positive imprint on people's lives. To this end, my friend, Dave left a giant footstep. Riposa in pace, Dio la benedicta. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Serge. Wendy, Steve, Heather, Dawn, the entire Liddle family, friends and colleagues of Dave Liddle. My name is Dennis Mock, and as a past president who worked closely with him, I have the honor of celebrating and paying tribute to the exceptional commitment and contribution that Dr. David Liddle has made to Nipissing University. It's fitting that we're gathered on campus where he was always welcomed and will always be remembered with the greatest of respect. Along with his quick smile and his firm handshake, Dave brought his core values and personal characteristics of integrity, honesty, transparency, generosity, and leadership to Nipissing University. He was respected and trusted by faculty, staff, students, administration, and the board alike. He understood and appreciated the freedoms and openness of an academic environment and encouraged discussion and debate, listening to all perspectives before making a decision. At a small but growing university that faced new challenges and minor crises, Dave's calm collegial leadership on the board was instrumental in finding widely accepted and fair and equitable solutions. He had the capacity to diffuse potentially confrontational situations, thus setting a standard of excellence and fairness. Dr. Dan Breyer told me that after witnessing Dave as chair of Nipissing board, he had the perfect model to emulate, and as a result, accepted the responsibility of chair himself. That's leadership. Dave always has placed a high premium on education. He talked often of his grandfather, his mom's dad, whom he credited with instilling and promoting his lifelong commitments to education and to family. Dave has left behind a legacy of respect and value for his ancestral roots, his children, his grandchildren, and when you look at this family and this institution, they verify that legacy. Dave was truly a gentleman and a scholar. I met him in September of 1967, as we both entered the MA PhD program in geography at the University of Toronto. We had grown up in small town southwestern Ontario and became immediate kindred spirits. He was a top student, completing his Master of Arts, and after a year at the London School of Economics, was well on his way to completing his PhD. But the doctorate would have to wait. Dave had to make a decision to leave behind his formal studies to successfully manage the family business. Dave loved life. He found pleasure and satisfaction in everything he did. Whether he was pursuing graduate studies, managing a fishing lodge, striking new entrepreneurial initiatives, decision-making in the corporate boardroom that Serge referred to, volunteering at Rotary and community events, holding the hand of a grandchild, hiking or golfing with Wendy in Arizona, or almost, well, I won't say best, but one of his best, catching walleye and preparing a shore lunch. He was wonderful at that. He lived each day to the fullest. Of those of you who knew him well, Dave had a fun, almost mischievous side to him. Some of my fondest memories of him are at his fishing lodges. But as he and I always agreed, what happened at fishing camp stayed at fishing camp. But with all these interests, Dave held a special affinity for his relationship with Nipissing University. He had more than 25 years of service, including member of the Board of Governors from 1989 to 1999, and serving as board chair from 94 to 97 with Dave Marshall as president. During this 10-year period, Nipissing received its university charter. He was appointed Nipissing's second chancellor in 2002 and was reappointed for a second term in 2006. During his 8 years as chancellor, he conferred over 9,000 degrees and 47 convocation ceremonies. In fact, many of you will recall those longer convocations when the entire process of crossing the stage to receive degrees would grind to a complete halt, as Dave had held an animated conversation on stage with a very excited student. He loved engaging people. Dave was a tireless advocate and champion of Nipissing University and was well known in the local community. He co-chaired the successful Learning Library Campaign Committee with Charles Gagnon. It was instrumental in facilitating the Schulich benefaction, the largest in Nipissing's history. For the integral part he played in the institution's transformation over this period, in 2011, Dave was awarded Nipissing's highest honor. He earned his doctorate. At his request, he was given an honorary doctorate of education so that he could address graduating teachers and share the value and esteem in which he held teachers and the role they played in the successes of individuals. Personally, I'm blessed to have known Dave as a close friend and cherished the time we shared, fishing, golfing, drinking red wine, good scotch, and comparing notes of our visions of Nipissing University as it was and has come to be. He was a personal mentor and a listening ear for me as we addressed the issues related to the growth and evolution of a small Northern Ontario university with limited resources and unique challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, Nipissing University has benefited greatly from the dedicated service, commitment, and generosity of Dr. David Liddle. He has forever left his handprint on the very heart of this institution. We're now going to have a very brief video of Dave following his presentation of doctorate.
What I say in the early part of my address is that it wasn't necessarily the classroom study that made me the person that I am. It was the values that I adhered to, the values that were instilled in me as a child. So I think it's important for them to remember that they have the opportunity to instill values in the children of today. There were two values that were very important to me, and that was the value of education, not just for me, but for society as a whole. But secondly, was the importance of giving back, leaving the world a better place than the way I found it. And you can do that by contributing time, energy, and even financial resources to do that. And I'm going to encourage them to do that as well in both their professional and personal lives, to give back to society. And from my experience, the rewards from that giving back far exceed the effort that they put into it. There's so many highlights over the 22 years. I can't point to one thing as being the most important. Certainly getting their charter in 1992 was a highlight. Just chairing the board for 3 years. Bringing all the board members together, the faculty, the students, and working together for the betterment of the university. That was a highlight for me. The opening of new campuses in Muskoka and Brantford. And the one that's most recent, well, I'm serving as chancellor for 8 years. And having the opportunity to congratulate close to 10,000 graduates. But a more recent event has been the Harrisonian Library, my involvement in that, right from the initial planning of the library, the co-chairing the fundraising campaign, the successful conclusion of the fundraising campaign, and now we've got the official opening in 2 weeks. So there's a lot of self-satisfaction around that particular project. I like to think that I'm a humble individual, and so it's a tremendous honor to be recognized in this way. My rewards have been constant over the last 22 years. I didn't do all this to receive an honorary degree, but it's nice to be recognized in this fashion. I should say too that back in the 60s, I spent 3 years working on a doctorate, but because of the untimely death of my father, I had to take over a family business, and I wasn't able to complete the doctorate. And so now, 40 years later, I'm getting a doctorate.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Limana, and I'm honored to have been asked to reflect on how Rotary values were an integral part of David's life. I met David for the first time when he was introduced to me by my father-in-law, Peter Kennedy. Peter and David were both members of the Rotary Club of North Bay. Peter told me that David was a good person, genuine, hardworking, and that he was very impressed with how David embraced his new home, the city of North Bay. After this introduction, our paths crossed not only in business, but as friends and as fellow Rotarians. Today, I would like to reflect on David's relationship with Rotary. While I was not a member of the David's Home Club, I am a member of the Rotary Club of North Bay, Nipissing, the one we will always refer to as the younger club. This was much to David's chagrin, as he was always the one with the youthful look. David began his Rotary career in the 70s when he joined the Wawa Club and became its president in 1979. With his move to North Bay, he joined the club here in 1980, becoming its president in 1991-92. David has devoted over half of his lifespan to the service of Rotary. David exemplified Rotary's motto, service above self. David was recognized as a Paul Harris Fellow, the highest honor a Rotarian will receive. During his Rotary career, he carried out many roles as a director of all the avenues of service, as an executive for 6 years with the Rotary Club of North Bay, and he also served on several Rotary International District 701 committees. In 1990, he chaired the District Rotary Convention held here in North Bay. During that convention, through his management, he allowed each of the chairs the opportunity to complete their tasks as they saw fit, respecting our individual skill sets and always supporting the role that we had undertaken. Colin Vesna recounted the story of how David, while at Camp Tillicum cleanups, would ensure that every volunteer was taken care of, would get them lunch, and then he would always be the last one to sit down. This clearly illustrates how he embodied Rotary ideal of service above self. Colin went on to say that David was everything that Rotary stood for: a man of honor, respectful, never said a bad word about anyone. He had a perpetual smile with a cup that was always half full. For those in the audience that are not familiar with Rotary, all Rotarians are asked to adhere to a 4-way test in both their professional and their personal lives. The test asks 4 questions of each of us. In all that we think, say, or do, is it the truth? All of us that know David can attest to the fact that he approached everything he did in an open, transparent, and honest way. It's hard to cite one specific example, so I will say this. I believe there's not one person in this room who has not experienced his honesty. The value of cutting to the chase and moving forward in a positive manner to get the task at hand done. He was not afraid of the truth. Is it fair to all concerned? When making decisions, he would listen and always look at the consequences from each person's point of view and not just his. He would make a decision that all parties could live with and respect. He was fair. Will it build goodwill and better friendship? David participated in and was involved in all events of both North Bay's Rotary Club, generating goodwill and building new inter-club friendships that are still prevalent today. As a member of the younger club, he made us feel that we were not only very much appreciated, but also respected for the contributions we made. It was truly an honor to not only conduct business with him, but to benefit from his interpersonal skills at many fellowship events, both in and outside of Rotary. And last, will it be beneficial to all concerned? I think perhaps this was the test that he truly excelled at. Many of you may not know that David was the catalyst for Rotary TV Bingo that he brought to fruition in 1993. Since inception, this service has not only returned in excess of $1 million, but has allowed the Rotary Club of North Bay to help numerous local charities while giving those who are shut in an opportunity to play bingo in the comfort of their own home. How many of the Rotarians in the room recall how resplendent he was, dressed in a tuxedo, hosting the inaugural TV bingo premiere? This, along with the Rotary Breast Screening Initiative, were examples of the many projects that help others. On a personal note, Jane and I have had the opportunity to travel to France with Dave and his team. While in Normandy with him, a place he had been to many times, he walked through the war memorials and the cemeteries, the beach, the bunkers, like he was sharing this experience for the first time with us. He was a sensitive, appreciative man who wanted to share an extremely important part of our history. It was profound. There are many great memories for us. His huge smile that lit up a room. A smile that reflects in his children. Fishing in Miminisca, breaking bread in France and Arizona, and attending the many Rotary functions we shared together with pride and purpose. Our Rotarian, David Liddle, has moved on from service above self to a higher service. We will miss him, but we will never forget him.
Good afternoon, Wendy, Dawn, Stephen, Heather, Megan. I'm very honored to speak today about Dave's insurance career. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Noella Anthony, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Optimum General, Branch Operations and Claims. I have worked with Dave for many, many years, from the time he hired me in 1990 in many capacities. Most recently, Dave sat on the board of directors of Optimum Insurance and Optimum West, and those were two boards I reported to. Today, I speak on behalf of the hundreds of employees who worked with Dave over several decades. Many of them are here today, and I'm going to be looking at some of them if I get a little nervous, for support. As well, his numerous colleagues at Optimum Group and the co-board members of Optimum Insurance and Optimum West. I want to share with you the story of Dave's remarkable insurance career. Remarkable is likely an understatement. Enormously successful, extremely professional is probably more apt. In the late 70s, Dave was one of over 1,000 members of the Northern Ontario Tourist Outfitters. During that period, it was becoming very difficult to find liability insurance, and Dave, along with several others, including Dean Wenborn, who is here today, decided to get their thinking caps on and try to find a solution. Once they got together and had their entrepreneurial styles melted, they came up with an idea that they were going to form their own insurance company. It was in 1979 that they were licensed under the name Northern Frontier Insurance, and they were going to write property and casualty insurance for various members. Now, you must understand that the capital required and the leadership that would be absolutely needed was immense. It's quite an undertaking and quite courageous for this group of people. The group was convinced that Dave was their leader. He was the person that they needed to get this enterprise going. They needed someone that would be able to work with the regulators, the brokers, and hire and develop employees. Not an easy undertaking, especially for someone who did not know anything about insurance. Dave, handed with the leadership task, began his long insurance career. In the early days, Dave needed to build his team, and he had a remarkable ability to attract great staff with his warm, friendly, enthusiastic approach. You should not be surprised to know there are employees that he hired back in 1979, 80, 81 that are still working for the insurance company today. When hiring employees, he had the keen ability to try and find a way to relate to them. He really wanted to know the type of person they were, not just their technical skills. It was important for him to have people on his team that were as passionate and dedicated as he was. Many of our employees have told me that in their conversations with Dave in their first interviews, it was really more about the common interests they had. One employee said that Dave and her started talking about the fact that they were both pilots and they had an immediate connection. Another talked about the fact that she was from Cochrane, and Dave related right away because he knew people from Cochrane. If you were willing to work hard and you were willing to learn, you had a job for life. When starting a new venture such as an insurance company, it was very important to be frugal, and Dave was that. Expenses must be controlled. The shareholders of the company never had to worry about overspending. In fact, there are so many stories about Dave's ability to manage expenses that I would not have time to share them all. The ones that describe his short arms, long pocket, frugal nature best are the stories of when employees would travel out of town on industry functions. Often they would pack a lunch and eat in the car, and maybe they would get a bathroom break along the way. There was no time to waste. There was no overspending. Once you got your destination, often you had to share a room with a fellow worker. One employee, who's actually here today, recalls when a couple of carloads of our staff were heading to Sudbury to attend the Northern Ontario Broker Convention. Prior to leaving North Bay, Dave ordered sandwiches and beverages from DeMarco's to take with them as they stopped in a picnic area along the way, picnic area that hadn't even been open yet for the season. In fact, some of them recall having to climb a fence to go to the outside outhouse. The thing is, nobody minded. They were all there to support Dave and do whatever they could to contribute to the success of the company. Did not ask anything of anybody that he didn't want to give of himself. In the early days, Dave was always rushing out of the office, on the verge of being late for an appointment or a flight. On more than one occasion, someone would have to call the airport, and seriously, this happens, and ask them to hold the plane because Dave was on it, was going to be on it, and he was late. And they would always ask in a resigned voice, was he at least on his way? Well, I'm sure that would never happen today. It really did happen, and Dave had the plane held for him. After the major renovations and additions were completed to our Main Street office and the old wooden desks were retired and new workstations were put in, people would be hard working at their desks, and they would turn around, and out of the blue there was Dave. No one could hear him coming. He was so light on his feet. That Christmas, the staff purchased a bell for Dave to wear so that they could be forewarned of his pending presence. Dave did wear that bell for one day. As the insurance company grew, the need for capital arose, and this is when Optimum Group came along. The success of Northern Frontier was beyond what was expected under Dave's leadership, and there came a time when the small group of owners needed to find more capital. That is when Dave sought out Optimum Group. It was 1985, and Optimum Group had just purchased an insurance company in Toronto called Upper Canada Insurance. The purchase of Northern Frontier would be just what they needed to get a foothold of Ontario. Once again, Dave was asked to assume the leadership of these two merged companies. At one point in North Bay, we had close to 90 employees, and Dave knew every person's name. Always took the time to speak to all of the employees, was familiar with who their spouses were, whether or not they had children, what their children's names were. He had an incredible memory and cared deeply for the employees and their families. If there was something going on in an employee's life, a wedding, a birth, a death, Dave was there asking how everything was, and was there anything he could do for them. In terms of our broker sales force, Dave gained the admiration of many brokers in Ontario, and in fact, National Frontier was named top insurer for several years by the Insurance Brokers Association of Ontario. This is no small feat when you consider the number of companies and the size of some of those companies that we were in direct competition with. Dave's customer intimacy strategy with a focus on service, relationship, and brand proved to be successful. He was organized, had established strong quality control systems, and was results-oriented. 1998, Dave announced that he was going to retire from the insurance business, which he did for several years. We did manage for a short time without him. However, it wasn't long after his retirement that Optimum Group came calling to bring Dave back. In 2002, Dave came back to Optimum Group as president of Optimum General. It was then that he worked and lived in Montreal. He was now the leader of the operations from Quebec to BC. And during that time, there were many young professionals, including myself, that were looking for an experienced and prudent advisor, and Dave was that person. Regardless of your area of expertise, at that time mine was claims, there were many actuaries, young actuaries. He had the ability to find the strengths in each of us, and he was able to bring out those strengths in the best possible way. Although Dave was serious and always displayed the core values of Optimum Group, client focus, employee focus, integrity, expertise, the ability to manage risk, rigor, and profitability, of course, profitability. He was also down to earth, and some might say, a whole lot of fun. His motto was work hard, play hard. At every Christmas party, Dave danced with every single female employee. In the early years, he used to have staff parties at his house on Lakeshore. One employee recalled that she'd been thrown into his pool. She says it wasn't by Dave, but I'm not so sure. She said that she got out of the pool, soaking wet, no change of clothes. Dave saw nothing of it to have her go to his room and get a pair of his shorts and t-shirt to put on so she could continue to party. Dave has been known to dress up as Davy Crockett and Roy Orbison at some of the parties. At one point in 2003, 6 of our Optimum staff from North Bay traveled to Montreal to do some testing for our automobile systems. Dave was the president of the company at that time, and it was certainly extremely busy. However, he never forgot the value of the employees. During that time, he took them out to dinner, had them at his apartment for dinner, always taking the time to see how they were doing while they were in Montreal. Cared about his employees regardless of how busy he was. He never took them for granted. He is remembered by his employees as a compassionate, considerate, concerned, and determined leader and friend. I was very fortunate during the last several years to be able to spend time with Dave. As a board member, he would travel to Montreal and Vancouver 4 or 5 times a year. We would get together for a drink or dinner, and we would always take the time to talk about business and the success that it had become. Dave was extremely proud of his contribution, and even more so, proud of the employees that he had mentored and encouraged along the way. Although at our numerous dinners we mostly discussed the insurance business, we often talked about our personal lives and how lucky we were. Dave was clearly extremely proud of his family, his grandchildren, and his children. He was very, very happy with his life with Wendy, the traveling, the time they spent together, the companionship, contentment. Last week, our Chief Executive Officer, Jean Paget, sent out a death notification to all employees of Optimum Group, announcing that we lost Dave. He summarized our loss by telling everyone that David, for all those who knew him, a highly competent colleague, a mentor, a man of remarkable human qualities. He will be greatly missed by all. Thank you.
First and foremost, he was a great parent.
David was someone that was pretty important for me in my personal life and my business life. David was a great friend.
You were a great friend, a great person to do business with. I had the honor and privilege of working with David Liddle in a number of different capacities. Very, very fine gentleman and very dedicated.
David was generous with his time and all really important to have someone like Dave around and someone that you can always rely on for support. And David is just an absolute great guy to deal with.
I worked with Dave as a board member, as a board chair, and as a chancellor. I have enormous respect for him, and I just wanted the opportunity to express how much I appreciated working with him and how much I enjoyed the time I spent with him.
And when all said and done, I can count on the fingers of one hand the number of people like you that I've met in my entire life. I know your family is very, very proud of you and all you contribute, and believe me, they have the right to be. I miss you very, very much, Steve. Take care.
Spend all your time waiting for that second chance, for a break that would make it okay. There's always some reason to feel not good enough, and it's hard at the end of the day. I need some distraction. Oh, beautiful release. Memories seep from my veins. Let me be empty. Oh, and weightless, and maybe I'll find some peace tonight. In the arms of the angel, fly away from here, from this dark, cold hotel room, and the endlessness that you fear. You are pulled from the wreckage of your silent reverie. You're in the arms of the angel. May you find some comfort here. So tired of the straight line, and everywhere you turn, there's vultures and thieves at your back. The storm keeps on twisting, you keep on building the lies that you make up for all that you lack. It don't make no difference escaping one last time. It's easier to believe in this sweet madness, all this glorious sadness that brings me to my knees. In the arms of the angel, fly away from here, from this dark, cold hotel room, and the endlessness that you fear. You are pulled
Wow, what a rich and rewarding life this man has had, and how he's enriched the lives of those around him. Good afternoon. I'm Craig Liddle, one of Dave's brothers. Others have spoken eloquently about Dave's accomplishments, ranging from the Northern Ontario Tourist Outfitters Association to the Rotary Club, to Northern Frontier and Optimum Insurance, and to Nipissing University. And I've listened to these speakers and realized that if I had any sense at all, I'd feel dwarfed in the presence of such a man. But I never did, because Dave did not take on airs. So now I want to speak to you from the perspective of family. On behalf of my brothers Jerry and Roger and my sister Sharon, about Dave as a brother and what he has meant to us. First and foremost, Dave loved the outdoors, as did the rest of our family. Our roots are in the town of Grimsby in the Niagara Peninsula, a relatively small town nestled under the Niagara Escarpment and surrounded by lush fruit orchards, where as a boy, Dave would go camping with his buddies in the woodlands of the escarpment. Stories have been told of campfire dinners, of catfish and frog legs caught in some farmer's pond. Fishing was in Dave's blood, right from an early age when he accompanied our father on speckled trout expeditions or just netted smelt down on the shore of Lake Ontario. While he loved the relaxation and adventure of the outdoors, he was also hardworking and willing to take on some great responsibilities. For example, at the age of 15, when her father, Jerry Liddle, suffered his first heart attack, Dave arranged the spraying and then the picking of over 3 acres of cherry trees on her grandmother Liddle's family farm at the age of 15. And when her father bought Camp Lakelsh, a fly-in fishing resort on Wabatongashi Lake in Northern Ontario the following year, Dave jumped in to work as a fishing guide, saving money for his university education. Dave was always a go-getter, and his entrepreneurial spirit blossomed as a young man when he and his best friend, Don Kershaw, built and operated 2 housekeeping cottages near Camp Lakelsh. As the firstborn son, I still remember how proud her father was of Dave and his many accomplishments. He was an avid Boy Scout, earning the prestigious Queen Scout Award. He had a fascination for flying, and he undertook to obtain his pilot's license while he was still a student. He was an honors student at the University of Toronto, and after graduating, pursued postgraduate studies in England at the London School of Economics. Our father's evident pride only served to reinforce the love and the respect that each of us had for Dave as we grew up. But then, in one of the defining moments of Dave's life, everything changed. Our father died of a heart attack at the age of only 57. And when Roger phoned me from Arizona this past week to tell me Dave was gone, I couldn't help recalling a distant memory from that fateful morning. That of watching as our father's brother John phoned his other brother Huey to break the news. "Jerry's gone fishing," was all he had to say. "Jerry's gone fishing." That melds with another mental image I still have from the following day of Dave stepping out of a taxi in our driveway in Grimsby, having flown home from his postgraduate studies in England to attend the funeral. It should come as no surprise that Dave, as the eldest, felt a personal responsibility to our mother and to the rest of our family. With no hesitation, he forsook a promising life of academia and instead returned to Canada to take over the management of the family fishing camp business, Camp Lakelsh. And in the years that followed, he and Roger formed a business partnership, building and running other fly-in fishing resorts, Timberwolf Lodge, Nagagami Lodge, Makokabatan Lodge, and Wimaniska Lodge. Some people say you should never go into business with friends, let alone family members. Well, the partnership between these 2 brothers lasted an amazing 45 years, and both Dave and Raj remained extremely proud, not only of how they worked together, but how they remained as close friends through all those years. Dave was blessed with 3 amazing children, Steve, Don, and Heather. He shared with them his love of the outdoors and took great pride and satisfaction in seeing them grow into the admirable adults they are today, with successful careers that just happen to include, amongst other things, management of fly-in fishing resorts. They have shared with me many loving memories of being with their father on the island on Wabatongashi, his teaching them the fine art of fly fishing, adventures where he would fly them into remote lakes after lake trout, enjoying the fantastic shore lunches he would cook, helping him with all the building projects, including his and Wendy's recently completed cottage, and just spending time listening to the stories of his growing up out at Kelch. Dave's family bonds went much farther than that, his immediate family though, as he sought to establish and maintain ties with even distant relatives, including traveling to Ireland a few years ago, to County Fermanagh, where our father's father left over 130 years ago to come to Canada. And just 5 years ago, Dave organized a family reunion on the Liddle side, bringing together the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of that lucky Irishman. Oh, and by the way, he and Wendy just happened to get married while in Ireland, in the same church our great-great-grandparents married in 1852. Dave loved to travel everywhere, visiting practically all corners of the globe, and he encouraged his children and the rest of his family to do the same and to experience the beauty of the world around us. Roger, Sharon, and I have wonderful memories of a trip we all took together to France just a few years ago, where Dave eagerly shared with us his experiences in the region, gained through his work with the Optimum Group. But he also took great pleasure from returning each year to Wabatongashi Lake and spending a good part of each summer at what we simply referred to as the island. There, he'd relax with family, enjoy his grandchildren, and take pride in the trophy monster walleye, averaging 8 to 10 pounds, that he was somehow able to repeatedly catch, photograph for proof, and then release back into the deep, dark waters. Now, let me talk about Dave's values, because anyone who knew him knew how highly principled he was. From an early age, he recognized the importance of interaction with people, both to stay in touch with family, friends, and business associates, and to expand his network of contacts. His ability in this regard contributed greatly to his success in life and is evidenced by the gathering of all of us here today. He held and shared core values that had been instilled in him from an early age, both from our parents and other relatives, notably our grandfather, who was a successful industrialist, and our great-grandfather, who was an educator. Dave recognized the importance of education for the advancement of society. He held it to be an essential element of both a healthy society and a productive economy. That explains his serving as school board trustee in Wawa many years ago, through to his well-recognized contributions to Nipissing University. Dave also accepted that we must each take responsibility for our own actions, and that success and achievement in life come from hard work and the effective application of time and talent. Next, he believed in giving back to the community, however your strengths allow. Anyone who knew Dave and all of the volunteer work he did would attest to this. And I think it's worth pointing out that one of Dave's wishes in the event of his death was to make his organs available for donation. You should know that as a result of this final act of service, a woman in Arizona is walking around carrying his liver. His corneas will help someone else see clearly, and his bone tissue will help 30 to 40 other patients regain their health. Isn't it a fitting tribute that Dave's last act was to provide this service to others? And finally, but most importantly, he loved and valued family. I've spoken about him as a devoted son, a caring brother, a loving father, and a doting grampy, but I must add that he was also a loving and supportive husband. And our hearts are all breaking for the pain that Wendy is suffering now. Stay strong, Wendy, and take comfort in Dave's deep and abiding love for you. Dave believed that all of these key principles, education, hard work, community service, and family bonds, must be nurtured and passed from generation to generation. How fitting it is, in fact, that we're here in the halls of Nipissing University, where he spoke eloquently about these very values in his inaugural address as Chancellor to the 2003 graduating class of the Faculty of Education and their families. Dave had his 70th birthday this past August, and thanks to Wendy's incredible efforts, a party was held at the island with all of Dave's children and grandchildren in attendance. And as a special surprise, Roger, Sharon, Jerry, and I appeared just as the celebrations began. It was the first time since our mother died 13 years earlier that circumstances had allowed all 5 siblings to be together again, and I know that Dave was very deeply moved by the occasion, as were the rest of us. It was a wonderful celebration of Dave's life, just as today, with the added bonus that he was there to laugh and cry with us as we reveled in our memories. And to top it all off, Wendy was able to announce to Dave and the rest of us that, thanks to her initiative, the province of Ontario had officially changed the name from the island to Liddle Island. And thanks to the younger men in the family, we then enjoyed one of the best fresh fish dinners of fresh Wabatongashi walleye that I think I've ever eaten. But the most memorable thing we witnessed that day was the love and adoration of Dave's grandchildren for him. Lucy, Ellie, Allison Carter, Henry, Mitchell, Jacob, and Madeline. They were all over him like flies over honey. And that's what is important in life, isn't it? That even as we take our last breath, we can take comfort in knowing that we've left the world a better place than we found it. And those core values that we were given by our parents and have cherished all their life have been passed safely on to our children and theirs. So now we can say, Dave's gone fishing. As part of Dave's family, we appreciate the outpouring of sympathy at this time and the expressions of support for our loss. But rest assured that we haven't lost Dave. We know exactly where he is. He's right here, and he's right here. And I can assure you that every time our family gathers for whatever reason, Dave will be right there with the rest of us. Thank you very much.
In a little bit, this will bring to a conclusion a remarkable journey. The journey of a man who shared his life with us. In these times, we do look for words of comfort. And I am reminded of the psalmist who said, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, do I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall feel no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comforteth me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Today we can say with surety that somebody up there is looking over us. To his family, may I suggest that I personally know that he loved you dearly, each and every one of you. And to Wendy, you were a big special in his life. As they say, you did put the icing on the cake. He was a happy man. This is how I wish to remember him. This marks the end of this celebration, a huge footprint, small man perhaps in stature, but with a big wow. You're all welcome to join us in the lobby to share and to continue to dialogue and greet the family, share your love. And to all the speakers who took time on behalf of the family, let me thank each and every one of you, for indeed, you are all very, very special in his life. Thank you.